Hi, in today's conversation, we're going to be talking about editing tests. The main difference between an editing test and a writing test is that while a writing test is about extracting key messages from a sample of writing or a piece of literature, an editing test is something which is specifically designed with inconsistencies and mistakes in order to get an assessment of whether we as test takers or assessment takers can spot those mistakes and highlight those mistakes and fix them as part of the editing assignment. Editing boils down to three things. Interestingly, all these three things begin with the letter C. It's clarity, consistency, and completeness. And a good editing assessment looks at all of these three elements in our ability to edit a piece. Clarity boils down to two things. The first is clauses as well as tense, and the second is punctuation for clarity. For example, if the opening sentence of a paragraph is in present tense, then it naturally flows that all the other sentences also need to be in present tense. Likewise, if the opening sentence is in past tense, then that similar pattern or motif needs to be carried forward. Sometimes it's easy to get mixed up in tense. This is one of the first things that we need to catch as editors. The second, of course, is punctuation, which can widely change the meaning of a sentence. So we need to be very carefully combing through the piece and finding out if punctuation is being used correctly and consistently. Speaking of consistency, the second element in editing is, in fact, consistency. What that means is sometimes in an editing test, data might be changed or statements might be changed in order to make them inconsistent. To give you an example, the beginning of the piece might say that the primary endpoint was met, and toward the end, it might say that we don't know whether the primary endpoint was met. So those kinds of changes, inconsistencies, is something that we need to open our eyes to and spot and be aware that sometimes these mistakes are made intentionally, giving us a chance to catch those mistakes and show our editorial skills. The third is completeness, which is slightly challenging sometimes because sentences can seem complete to the untrained reader, but as editors, we need to catch those instances where sentences might be incomplete. To give you an example, consider the sentence, "A significant decline in body mass index was observed." This seems like a complete sentence, but from a medical writing or a medical editing perspective, it is incomplete because the question would be, a decline in body mass index was observed compared to what? Compared to what? There is no comparator there. Was it compared to baseline? Compared to 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago? Compared to patients in a different cohort? What is it? What's the comparison? What's the comparator? So this kind of incomplete sentences sometimes are snuck in to the editing assignment in order to make us aware that the sentence is incomplete, and we need to go in and try and fix that based on the information provided earlier or based on the information provided later within that article. So think about these three things when working on your next editing assignment. Think about clarity, consistency, and completeness with your next editing assessment. All the best.